Welcome to the Uncovered podcast. I'm Jarrod Kimber, and with me is I would say, sexy for sexy replacement as far as Bharat Sundaresan goes. But Bharat is actually weirdly going to be on Wagon Wheel again with me later in the week. But for now, we have Behram Qazi from Grassroots Cricket. You might know him on Twitter as, I want to say Def Mango. Is it Def Mango?
It is Def Mango, yes.
There we go.
Translates to Behra Am in Urdu, so Behram for viewers. It's a pun.
Also, for me, but I get that now. What was that? What else was I going to say? Thanks for popping in. You're actually, weirdly enough, I think, because you and I have done a couple of Red Inker episodes, and like one's due this week, so suddenly everyone is going to be sick of you after this week. Never been on the podcast before, and you're going to be on about 83 times. But thanks for popping in again. We're going to go through a bunch of talking points on the podcast today. If you have a super chat that you are desperate for myself or Mr. Mango to answer, feel free to send that through to us. We might get to a couple of questions at the end as well. I wanted to start with the Ireland-Sri Lanka test match. So did you pay much attention to this one, or is this in the background of your cricket watching?
I paid a lot of attention to this one because whenever Ireland play test cricket, and I think it's happening after 3 years, if I'm not wrong, which is really criminal. I mean, it might have been a couple of years or 3 years, but I love it when Ireland cricket gets coverage. And yeah, I mean, especially when Sterlo and Curtis Campher got hundreds, I was like, okay, Gaul test, first innings, Ireland 192. Something could happen over there, but then obviously the inevitable happened.
Well, I want to talk about the inevitable. So I was watching those first couple of days, and with all due respect to Curtis Campher, I was thinking to myself, it's a pretty good pitch to bat on. Well batted and everything, but it was a very good pitch to bat on. And I watched pretty much most of the Irish innings one way or another. And it became clear they weren't going to make 550 or 600. I almost went to Twitter and went, I don't think they've got enough. But I didn't want to be the sort of, Irish fans are some of my favorite fans in cricket. They are, I would say, I would go as far as to say they're almost the most least toxic of cricket fans out there, which isn't really a high bar to cover.
Absolutely.
But even so, they are, I think they really follow, as you said, they haven't had a test in a couple of years. It was a celebration. They've made almost 500 in Sri Lanka. I didn't want to be the one to go on and go, so guys, I think this is going to go poorly for you. But I kind of pushed the game away. And then I'd click in and I'd watch half an hour and I was watching the Sri Lankans bat. And two things really sprung to mind. And I think Tim might have actually put this up in the comments as well. Two things instantly sprung to mind to me was that the pitch was absolutely as flat as I thought it was. And that, as he says here, Sri Lanka was scoring really quickly. I think outside of one of the openers, was it Madushka? I think he might have had a strike rate of 60. Everyone else, even Karunaratne had a strike rate of 85. And it was ridiculous how quickly they all scored. And there was a part of me that was like, I'm not going to tune in with this game again until I feel comfortable that Ireland are at least still in the game or going to lose it. And the next time I turned it on, I think they'd lost, was it 2 or 3 quick wickets in the second innings? And I was like, oh, this is going to go poorly. And it reminded me of the test match they played at Lord's against England. Remember when they bowled them out for -5 on day one? And everyone was really excited. I was like, yeah, I've seen Ireland play. I'm not saying they're not capable of this, but I also am pretty sure they're capable of the other side as well.
They nearly beat Pakistan as well in their debut test.
But that was a perfect example of how did they nearly beat Pakistan? Do you remember? They were asked to follow on because they were so far behind in that game. And then Kevin O'Brien. So they have the ability to compete with these better teams. And we've seen it. There's 3 test matches straight away, but they don't have the ability to do it over 5 days. Partly, as you also said, because they don't play that much test cricket. This is what it looked like. You look at some of their cricketers and you're like, there's talent here. The bowling, especially in Asia, is probably a bigger concern. But you look at their players and you go, there's some talent here. But managing that over 5 days, and Sri Lanka just steamrolled them for 3.5 days of that test match. It was pretty brutal in the end, wasn't it?
Yeah, I mean, it's one of the tougher places to tour, Sri Lanka, because they're just so good at their home turfs. And also, I think, lots of positives for Ireland to take from this, because look, this is a team that really hasn't played away. I don't think they've played away. Someone correct me in the comments or something if I'm wrong.
They played Bangladesh.
Yes, they played Bangladesh. Again, terrible place to tour if you're a non-Asian side. But
and
this,
I believe the other test match that they played, if I'm not mistaken, was did they not play Afghanistan in India?
they might
Or am I
have.
making that
They
up?
might have. Yeah, I think Rashid steamrolled them in that one.
God, I can't even
It could have
remember.
been another team. It might have been Ireland. Honestly, I can't quite remember. But okay, so they're a team that haven't really played a lot of Test cricket away from home or a lot of Test cricket period. And I think we were having this discussion on another one of the pods as well, that in order to survive in the longer format, you need to play consistent Test cricket with quality sides and in different conditions. And I don't think that for these lesser endowed teams, I'm going to use that word because I don't want to call them lesser teams.
I love that phrase. You've made
Yeah.
you've made them. There's a lot of masculine people who are going to feel really uncomfortable at that. But continue.
Yeah, so and of course, I mean, like you said, I love not just the Irish fans, but the Irish people are some of my favorite people in the world. I visited Ireland, and you go to the pubs and everyone's talking to you. Everyone wants to know your story. Everyone comes up to you. Extremely happy people and very, very kind. So I do wish them the very best. And when Ireland did score 500, sure, it was a road, but then again, they were in foreign land, never played in Sri Lanka before. And then you're playing that Prabhat Jayasuriya guy, who is probably like the third coming of Rangana Herath or something. And he's already up to 50 wickets in 7 test matches. So if he gets another string of test matches in Sri Lanka, he's beating Yasir Shah's record, where Yasir, I think, beat Clary Grimmett, and he has, 100 tests and 15 odd tests or so, 100 wickets and 15 tests, pardon me. So Prabhat is 50-7, tied Vernon Philander, and this guy has, 6 fifers in 7 tests, which is amazing. And 2 tenfers. So, with Prabhat in that attack, it's always going to be challenging, especially come third day or third or fourth innings. And I think Ireland did well, got to 500. They needed a moment of inspiration. Unfortunately, they couldn't get that. But positives, Balbirnie, the skipper, got runs, missed out on 100. Sterlo, senior member of the squad, comes in the middle order, scores runs. Very good positive. Then you have Lokan Tucker, who's only gotten better every time we see him. Really, really impressed with that guy. Keeps wicket as well. So that is a lot of value add in a team. And that's something that Ireland can really take forward. And then Curtis Campher, I think, was just unfortunate in the sense that South Africa have quota rules. Because he could have played for South Africa, right? I definitely think that he has.
I don't think that's a quota thing at all. I don't think he gets anywhere near the South African side. Like,
fair enough. I mean, with Janssen coming up, and I think Marco Janssen is a.
He's 5'8" or 5'9", right? And most South African like David Visa can't get in the side, right?
Yeah.
He's medium fast. Like, if you compare it to Grant Elliott, right? Like, I think it's pretty fair to say that, between the two of them, Grant Elliott's probably a slightly better cricketer than him. And Grant Elliott was a similar situation. You look at your international team, and you wonder how you're going to get in. And I think, he'd already played, so Camphor had already played under 19 cricket. And I think if he continues, he probably becomes a fairly decent sort of lower level first class player in South Africa. But I don't think he's getting anywhere near the South Africa.
He could have gone to New Zealand. You see a lot of South Africans going to New Zealand and making a name for themselves.
Well, the reason he didn't go to New Zealand is simply because he is Irish. Like, he has a grandmother who's Irish, and they had an Irish passport. He didn't get an Irish passport for cricket. He got an Irish passport because he was Irish, and his family gave it to him. He could have gone to New Zealand. I think he plays that game against South Africa, and I'm trying to remember. Against Ireland. It was 2018, I think, off the top of my head. And I think at that point, he probably wasn't at the level that anyone in New Zealand was going to recruit him. Maybe in the next year or so that would have happened, because that's what I don't know if people know this, but that is actively what happens, right? You sometimes you get the local player do it themselves. You look at someone like Neil Wagner. Neil Wagner was offered 2 Colpack deals that I'm aware of, and probably had talks of others. And he had a side in New Zealand. The Scottish guys, the Irish guys, the Dutch guys, they literally listen out for players. If they hear of anyone playing under 19 cricket. I was contacted by someone recently from one of the international teams who said, keep your ear out for anyone who might, have a passport that might be out. So these things happen, right? But Curtis Campher it was remarkable, of course. He plays against Ireland, smashes them around, and goes over there. But yeah, the whole thing is very, very interesting from that perspective. I've just got the full list while you were chatting. I was trying to bring up the full list here. So the first one was in 2018. So I was at that first game, and they lost to Pakistan by 5 wickets after giving Pakistan a bit of a scare. After
Imam saved Pakistan in that game. Otherwise, they were, collapsing. I remember it was Imam
they?
al-Haq.
I've got to remember. Were they chasing like 90 or 100 or something?
Early 130s or 120, 150 maybe perhaps.
Yeah,
it was
wasn't
around
many,
that
was it?
region. But then again, it was one of those games where Pakistan was under a lot of pressure because they had forced to follow on, and then they were about to lose that game, and the meltdown would have been unreal. So,
No, you're right. It was more
enough,
than I remember. It was 160, and they were. I just want to get the score right. They were 14 for 3 when it was Baba and Imam Al Haq came together. So that was 2018. 2019, they I was right. They did go to India and lose to Afghanistan.
Is
by
there a
7
Rashid
wickets.
Khanfur in that game?
You're testing my Googling here. Wait. Rashid in the first innings took 2 wickets, and in the second innings took 7. So took 5.
Nearly.
Sorry, took 5. So he took 7 in the
2
game.
fives. Yeah, so I was right. Yeah.
So that was their second one. Then they played that one at Lords that we mentioned before, where I'll get the exact score on this because probably should have it.
Gave England a proper scare over there. I remember that.
Yeah, they bowled England out for 85. It was one of the more remarkable days of cricket I've ever been at in my life. And when I say that they bowled them out, this was a team that had Root, Bairstow, Moeen, Chris Wokes, Sam Curran in it as well. So there was some decent batters in that. Then there's the big gap. And then, of course, they go over to Bangladesh. They ended up losing that first test by 7 wickets. Obviously, Sri Lanka absolutely crushed them in the first test at Galle. And then in the second test was the one where they've made almost 500 in the first innings and still managed to lose by an innings and 10 runs, which on its own is a remarkably, ridiculous.
How often do you score nearly 500 runs and lose by an innings? I don't think it's probably happened a lot. Ask Steven. Steven, if you're looking at this, if you're watching this show, please let us know.
I'm trying to think. There's one off the top of my head that I have seen before, but no, you're right. It just doesn't happen very much. It's a lot of runs to make, and it does come down to, as you said, the great bowling of the Sri Lankan team, but also just that rapid pace. Just while we're on Ireland as well, I don't know if you saw this week, but Tim Murtagh, did you follow up on?
I saw how he did a solid number on Zach Crawley. And every time I watch Zach Crawley bat, I just feel like Pakistan is responsible for this guy's extended run in England's international team, because that 267 aside, Zach Crawley hasn't impressed me an awful lot with the bat, and Tim Murtagh properly schooled him over there. 41-year-old, 1,000 first-class wickets, and first shapes it away, and I reckon then he brought it in, and he knocked him over. And really, I think Ireland could have benefited from Tim Murtagh in the squad, and perhaps even Josh Little, because I know that Sri Lanka is generally a destination where you need turners and spinners, but having that kind of quality in the pace department definitely could have helped them. I mean, Nishan Madushka, of course, not taking anything away from him, solid double 100. But then again, not the strongest bowling attacks on a Galle road, which is not something I'm used to saying, actually. It's kind of weird. But I mean, it does take away from it a little bit, even though I think that he was phenomenal in the way he batted, along with, of course, Kusal Mendes. Love to see that guy play for Sri Lanka in whites, by the way. I think Sri Lanka owe him like a statue for winning them that game in South Africa, where he just went with the tail and scored 150 odd. So there were a lot of strong performances there. Of course, Angelo and
Wait a minute. Did you say Kusal Mendes? Did you mean Kusal Pereira?
Kusal Pereira.
Don't worry.
Right.
The two Kusals,
Massive howler on my part.
No, I cannot tell you how many times I've written it down, and I know the difference between the two of them. Do you know what I mean? Like I've commentated on them. I could tell you the difference because physically they look nothing alike. And
absolutely nothing. And Kusal Mendes is actually a very stylish player. And I remember the runs he scored versus Australia a few years back on that torrid tour where Australia just folded like a pack of cards. But anyway, again, splendid player, Kusal Mendes. I think he's very aesthetically pleasing. Is definitely one for I think it is time now. It's not one for the future anymore. It is his time now, because he was one for the future a few years back. Lots of positives for Sri Lanka as well. Expected to win this, expected to steamroll Ireland, and they did so. But Timmy Murtagh, fantastic achievement. We talk about Jimmy Anderson, but here's a guy who's older than him. He's 41. He's got 1,000 first-class wickets. He's still doing the business and getting England's first-team opener out in that fashion. So I think like Ireland could definitely have done with his services, and he's definitely a legend of the game, definitely in county cricket. No
I
question.
think when it comes to Murtagh, I mean, I haven't actually talked to him about this directly, but I think as much as anything, they weren't playing test matches, right? And he's not as good in the other formats, right? It's just not something that he's as good at. So I had a chat with him a couple of years ago because I'm writing this big piece on wobble balls, and I've talked about 100 different bowlers and how they go and all this sort of stuff. And I commentated with Tim Murtagh. I can't remember what it was. It must have been for some island games for TalkSport. And I was chatting to him about the wobble ball, and he said, "Oh, I don't have a wobble ball." And I was like, "Really?" Because there's like this ball that you bowl, and it does this thing, and it looks like a wobble ball to me. And he said, "No, what happened was I've got an outswinger, and I bowl the outswinger every single delivery, no matter what's happening. That's just my stock ball over and over and over again. But sometimes I lose my action just a little bit, and when I lose my action, I accidentally roll my fingers on the ball, and it becomes an off cutter, and it comes back." And it basically does what he was saying is like an accidental wobble ball. This is one thing I have found that there are a couple of players who just have accidental wobble balls and Tim Murtagh. But it was incredible how honest he was about it. Like he could have just told me he had the world's best off cutter, right? And I would have been 100% on his side. And in the end, and he was basically saying that at times he thought maybe I should fix my action so I don't occasionally bowl that ball, right? And then one of his coaches sort of said to him, well, look, no one can play it. Like, don't fix it while it's happening. So it's incredible to think that someone like him has gone on to take 1,000 wickets, which just tells you how good you can be in bowling if you have one, massively above average skill, which for him is that, the line and the length, and then the ability to move the ball away. But I don't know if you know this. Do you know who's taken the most first-class wickets of all time?
It's got to be a spinner, right? It has to be a spinner. Is it
is
Jim Laker?
No. So Jim Laker, I don't think. I mean, this is where it gets really funny. Like as far as modern day players go, I think Harath might be up high, but
He could be.
It's really this list of incredibly old players. Let's see where Laker is. Laker has 1944, right?
It's quite
so.
A number.
So we've just said Tim Murtagh, incredible to have 1,000, right? Laker had 1944. He still has less than half the most.
Oh my God, that's staggering. I mean, is it perhaps no? Murli wouldn't have played enough first-class cricket because he was playing for Sri Lanka from a very young age. So it has to be someone from Is it?
I think of the
Spinners
modern.
from the past. Spinners from the past.
Yeah, no, it's way older than that. I'm trying to remember that. So Courtney Walsh has 1800. So okay. I know you wouldn't really call him modern day cricketer, but a more modern day cricketer. Malcolm Marshall has 1600. John Embry has 1600. I'm trying to remember. There's one other modern-ish player. I don't think Harath is that far away on the list as well. But there's a few. Obviously, Jimmy Anderson has more than 1,000. But the leader of all time is Wilfred Rhodes. All right, he has 4,204 first-class wickets.
All right then.
At an average of 16, so a pretty low average. But he had to bowl 200,000 balls in order to get that number, or just under 200,000 balls. He bowled from 1898 until 1930. So he bowled a full career before World War One, and then a full career after World War One.
Wow.
So if there was no World War One, I mean, he has to go over 5,000. It's ridiculous. Titch Freeman. So Wilfred Rhodes was a spinner. Titch Freeman, another spinner. He's got 3,700. And then there's a bit of a drop off until you get down to the next one. There's two more guys. There's Parker and Hearn, who are both over 3,000 as well. So there's some ridiculous careers out there. So if you think about, someone like Tim Murtagh even get anywhere near the level of those sorts of players is absolutely remarkable. As you said, a bit of a shame he hasn't played for Ireland, but he kind of is a test match player, and they weren't playing test match cricket, and he can make more money for Middlesex going that way. Anyway, we're going to take a break here on Uncovered as I quickly try and find an ad. And we'll be back in a minute or so, and we'll be talking about what happened in the IPL today, because Behram's all over this one. If you like what we are making here and you want to know if you can help out, well, you can. On top of asking super chats on our lives, you can also support us through Patreon or buy me a coffee. The more support we can get, the better and more videos we can make. On Patreon, there are plenty of other things we offer too, like a Discord server, the chance to ask questions directly, AMAs, and early versions of our recordings. This channel only exists because people like you help support it. We have to buy equipment, software, pay wages, and my mortgage, I suppose, just to make this stuff happen. And if you don't have any money available to spend, it isn't just your money we want. Shares, likes, retweets, comments, subscriptions, the little bell icon thing, all of it. They help us build and become more professional, make more videos, better videos, all that sort of stuff. So thank you for watching everything we make and for all your support so far. Welcome back to Uncovered. Jarrod Kimber and Behram Qazi here. Behram, you can find him on Grassroots Cricket, or you can find him on this podcast because he's here right now. Let's get to the IPL stuff. So I record most of the IPL games if my family's around, and then watch them when I can, in between NBA playoff games at the moment. Go Nuggets. But the IPL game, I went to Twitter before, and I saw, just a string of photos of Virat Kohli looking angrily into the distance at someone. I'll let you explain it because I'll probably get the details slightly wrong, but it does seem like a very funny moment in IPL cricket. Take it away.
So first of all, if you've recorded this game, better not watch it with your family. That's where I'll start off with. Look, sorry, I just automatically said Afridi because we're talking about Gautam Gambhir. But Virat Kohli and Gautam Gambhir, this is not the first time they've had a war of words, right? They've been at it in the past as well. Gautam Gambhir has been very critical about Virat, the captain, in the past. And then just earlier this season, when we saw LSG beat RCB, we saw how animated Gautam Gambhir got. And that was quite something. That definitely did make, I wouldn't say headlines, but it was meme content. People were definitely getting on top of that. Now, I only had one eye on the game today. I was also working on some other stuff for Grassroots. But I mean, I was kind of sort of watching it. And I reckon initially, Kohli was feeling it a bit. He was in an animated mood. He had a few words with Amit Mishra as well. Someone who had a closer eye on the game can definitely correct me over here from the comments or in the comments or anything. But that's how it all started. And then towards the end of the game, or actually after the end of the game, Kohli and Naveen ul Haq had a bit of a scuffle. And Naveen he has a bit of a reputation for getting himself into these situations. I've seen him do it in the past as well. And ultimately, this is Virat Kohli. And he's just beaten you at a game defended 126 odd. This is probably not the best time to be getting on the wrong side of Virat Kohli. And he handled it. I thought Virat handled that part maturely. Then I reckon Kyle Mayers got into a little bit of something with Virat. And that's when Gautam came in. And Gautam Gambhir and Virat Kohli, I mean, given the history that they've had, they actually kind of went off at each other and other people had to come in between. Lots of pointing. Virat did the whole silencing act like Gambhir from the previous game. And lots of subplots, lots of interesting subplots, very WWE-esque today from the IPL. And honestly, I mean, from someone who is a third-party observer, I kind of loved it. Well, Virat versus Gambhir part 2 or 3 is the kind of subplot that we were waiting for in our lives, especially if you're into that sort of drama. And I think I tweeted out there that if someone from India, Pakistan, Twitter, wherever can recreate the Afridi Gambhir dubbing into a Kohli Gambhir dubbing, I'm all ears. I'm welcome. It would be much appreciated. But I think that Virat, might have lost his cool a bit as well. And Gambhir, of course, being Gambhir, it's not the first time we've seen him get super animated, right? He has a bit of a reputation of being that way. So it got a bit out of control, enough to give us lots of meme content, flood Twitter, take the focus entirely away from the fact that RCB defended 126 in an IPL game in a tournament where everyone was chasing down 200. So I think that's a very important thing to point out. And what transpired after the game shouldn't take the focus away from what actually transpired in the game. And that's my take on it. But yeah, top drawer, box office, love it.
So there's a couple of things I really enjoyed. One was when the clip I saw, I read a couple of articles of it, but I didn't see as many of the clips. But the clip I saw was when KL Rahul tried to get Naveen to come over and talk to Virat Kohli. And I saw a lot of people saying he was asking him to apologize. We have no idea. It could have just been, guys, let's be adults, come and talk to each other. And Naveen just turns, and KL Rahul's face is hilarious, as if, what? How? Why are you going the other way? Just absolutely, it's, when you do a favor for someone and you try and get them together, with someone who's, more popular than you or whatever, and then it gets completely blown up before you get a chance. So there's a beautiful moment of KL Rahul. But the other thing I was thinking is that there is we were complaining about this, and there were people in the comments talking about this as well the other day. Some of the tweeting by the Twitter accounts, the social media accounts for the IPL teams is so friendly. Like, they'll be playing against Chennai, but their account will just be completely pro Dhoni, right? And and you see it with Virat as well. I can't remember which team it was playing against RCB, and when Virat took over the captaincy for that first time back, and they were basically saying, "Oh, it's great to see Virat cap." What? You're playing against them, right? And we obviously have seen the other side of that. There was the slap back in the day, and there has been arguments.
And Srisant.
Yeah,
slap, right?
way back. So we've seen
Early days.
Yeah, that was really early on in the IPL.
I think Pakistan players used to play in the IPL back then, and that tells you something, right? That's how early it was.
Was it 2007 or 2008?
I think it might have been the inaugural season. If not, it might have been the second one where Gilly won it with the Deccan Chargers. No later than that.
It was really early. You're right. And we've had players fall out with each other and stuff before. Not all of this makes the media, but sometimes it does, and sometimes you hear stuff and everything else. But there is an element of, if this is going to be a league, right? Even if these players are all from the same country, they have to be, when they're out in the middle, still playing as full on. And Virat Kohli is that kind of player. Naveen is definitely that kind of player, right? Kyle Mayers is an interesting one, because I've never thought of Kyle Mayers as that kind of person before, but maybe he is, and we just, maybe it's just taken him a couple of years to find his voice at international level.
Maybe Gautam Gambhir has unlocked that version of him. Who knows?
Well, but the point is that Gambit is that sort of person as well. So I think it's a really, really interesting situation to have going ahead, because I don't know if you remember I'm trying to remember the name, Marlon Samuels and Shane Warne.
Oh, that's like the pinnacle of it, right? You're taking that to the extreme. That's like Warney swearing at the top of his lungs with the mic on.
Throwing the bat for Marlon Samuels, all that sort of stuff. That's obviously a little bit too far, right? That's where I remember James Sutherland defending that. But James Sutherland's general point when he was CEO of Cricket Australia for that was that it shows it's a real competition. And I do sometimes look at some of these other leagues, and the IPL is not the only one. There's a few of them where you do think to yourself, look, I've got no problem with you guys being best friends, but you still, if you're playing for this team and it really matters, you still want to burn the other person. So to go back to the NBA, there was Minnesota played Denver in the last round of the playoffs, and there were two Canadian players playing on each other, right?
Right.
And they were literally, exactly, your boys.
Was one of them Wiggins? Is that guy still around?
Wiggins is still around, but he plays for Golden State. No, it was I forget the Minnesota guy, but Jamal Murray was playing for the Nuggets.
That guy.
And whoever was defending him from Minnesota, Alexander Walker, I think his name is, right?
All right.
And they were going at each other and they were jawing at each other and everything. And you're like, they're going to be playing a World Cup or an Olympics very soon, where they're going to be probably both starting, or at the very least both in the rotation of that tournament. And they would have grown up knowing about each other, probably playing around each other and all that sort of stuff. They have a relationship. It's Canadian basketball. For all I know, they're old men are friends, right? And yet they still have that. And that's not to say afterwards you don't want them to shake hands and all that sort of stuff. But you do want that little bit of fire, the same that you see from international sport. If franchise cricket is just a friendly endeavor, I don't know how you feel about it, but for me, that gives it like a limit, right? And the weird thing about the IPL is, in fact, Nahal's just put if you've got a question for one of us, feel free to put through a super chat, everyone. But this is quite interesting from Nahal. Some tweeting is getting toxic, right? This is really interesting. Yeah, I mean, you could say that about any topic, of course, when it comes to Twitter, especially since Elon changed the algorithm. But the basic thing is that the fans are already there. They're already taking it really, really seriously. And then you've got the social media accounts of the teams not taking it seriously. And sometimes you've got the friendly nature of the players. It does need to get to that level when playing for whatever your jersey is actually matters. Otherwise, it's kind of all make-believe, right?
No, I totally get that. I mean, I think the PSL has evolved in that regard. It was super friendly at the start, and now you see that the teams are really going at each other. If not the players as much, the fans are completely going at each other, and the social media accounts of the teams are engaging in proper banter. I think Change of Pace, one of the Pakistani Twitter accounts that covers cricket, they did like a meme wars sort of thing in which they would allocate points to whoever burned the other team better. I think you need more of that in the IPL, because I think it was Rajasthan Royals or someone, and the tweets that they were tweeting out, it didn't seem like they were Team Rajasthan at all. And I think, like, whilst I am of the opinion that it is totally fine to view a league being not being a fan of any team and just appreciating the cricket. That's how I watch a few leagues. But it's very important to have that fandom element in it, and it's very important for rivalries to build. So if I see Chennai playing Mumbai, I expect things to get hot and heavy because this is the supposed classical of the IPL, right? So in that regard, I think that this game might have even benefited the overall brand of the IPL, because you have Virat Kohli, arguably the biggest superstar in Indian cricket after Sachin Tendulkar. And then you've got someone like Gambhir, who often finds himself in the news and is also a politician on the side. And then you've got the meek face of KL Rahul trying to just steady the ship in between. Lots of fun content over there. But
and
ultimately,
also the international player element, right? Like,
yeah.
What Naveen shouldn't have to act like Virat Kohli's a god, right? Like in his mind, that's actually what we want. We want him to just think of him as another player who's annoyed him on the field. And that should be different to how other people treat him. Like that's a natural thing.
Do you remember Glenn McGrath versus Brian Lara?
Yeah.
That's the classic, right? That's the one, the early days of YouTube. You'd YouTube Glenn McGrath versus Brian Lara, Kumar Sangakkara versus Sean Pollock, and Afridi and Gambhir. Those are the three favorite sledging moments I think I have in all of cricket. And Sanga's one was just chirpy and fun. McGrath and Lara got ugly. And I think Lara kind of won that in my eyes. Solid responses. And I think Sarwan and McGrath also beefed big time.
Yeah, so Sarwan did made a comment about McGrath's wife, and I think she was, or might have already had cancer at that point. So
Jane.
Yeah, it went a little bit pear-shaped. I'm pretty sure I'm remembering that one right. Yeah, it's an interesting thing of cricket that you have this weird sort of dynamic, and so you do have these incidents, and they're never like a fair fight anyway, if a fair fight was ever to break out or anything like that. But there should be an intensity to the way that the games are played.
This time in the PSL, you had Babar Azam versus Mohammad Amir, and it was 1-1 by the end of it, because Amir got Babar in the second game, and Babar creamed Amir for a couple of beautiful cover drives in the first game. So that was a nice little subplot to have. All I'm saying, it builds to the brand and the drama of a league when you have these subplots. And Kohli versus Gambhir is as box office as it gets. Like, Gautam Gambhir has been very, very vocal about Virat Kohli, the captain. He was almost, rampant in his, rants where he would just go off on how Kohli doesn't deserve to be the captain. And I mean, he even made some fair points. But with Gambhir, I feel it's just that it's the tonality that comes out of him that stirs a lot of people up. I just feel that's the case.
Yeah, my memory of Gambhir was all the way through his career. He wasn't the most popular with teammates and everything else. I remember getting a text message from someone when he went into politics and said he's actually found a way to annoy more people, which I thought was quite good. Any other IPL thoughts? My only other one was the Tim David game, where I was doing the maths in that game, and I was like, this tells you how much Tim David has changed from. I was kind of there at his breakout because I was there when he first started playing. I'm trying to think if I was at one of his first Big Bash games.
Hobart Hurricanes, right? That's who he plays for?
No, he's playing for the Scorchers at that point.
Oh, okay. All right. Yeah, so he's a JL product then.
Yeah, he was in that setup and couldn't really break through for a long time. Obviously, went over and played for Singapore, then played against Scotland. So Singapore beat Scotland in those World Cup qualifiers, where I think he failed, and I still think I have bowling plans that might work against against him, but weirdly enough, teams don't really seem to use that much. But I think he failed in that game, but he ended up like taking a wicket or getting a run out and then taking like 4 catches. He was like deep mid wicket to deep mid wicket. But he's a fantastic player, but it's so interesting to see someone who couldn't even break into a Big Bash side. I think before Singapore, maybe he played 3 Big Bash games. And I remember chatting to him a little bit when he was in the UAE for those qualifiers. He's just a nice guy who works really hard. Like you could see around the nets how much extra he was putting into his game and everything else in the professional side of it. But then now you've got the sort of cricket hipsters picked Tim David out a long way. And I think a lot of people thought, not that he was a busted flush, but that maybe he wasn't quite the player at this level.
Well, I'll tell you this, Jared. If you ask any PSL fan, they'll take full credit. They'll take full credit for Tim David, because Lahore Qalandars is where he really, made a mark. Then Multan got him, and I think he won them the title, if I'm not wrong. And look, when you've got a player like Tim David who can come in the lower middle order, he can strike at 160, and I think he averages 40 with the bat. Those are unreal numbers. 40, 160 is a combination that I would kill for. And I think that Mumbai Indians, if they cannot assemble a team around Surya Kumar Yadav, Sky, who is also a very similar sort of a cricketer in a similar mold, such that he strikes at a really high rate, and you've got Tim David, you've got those guys back to back. If you guys cannot assemble a team around those guys or build a core around those guys, then I don't understand. I don't think there are any excuses for you not making the playoffs, because those guys come one after the other. One of them needs to work, and you've got Ishan Kishan, Rohit Sharma, and I'm probably missing someone at this point, but those two alone are huge names, and them not firing at the top is hurting Mumbai. Because if they can give them a solid platform, Mumbai have what it takes to go deep with the bat. Might not have the best bowling attack, especially in Bumrah's absence, but I think that it's absolutely inexcusable for you to have that sort of wealth of resources and still be 4 games out of 8 at this point. So I'm going to be very critical of the Mumbai Indians. I think that they need to pull up their socks.
Yeah, I think their batting's okay. I think you're right. Ishan Kishan's really interesting, and I'll probably do a video on him eventually, because I think he's had 1 year, and that year was so spectacular that people can't really get over it. But in his overall, that hasn't fired. But because he had that year so young, it's hard for you not to think that he's a superstar. Rohit
Got
Sharma,
an ODI double recently as well, which helps his case further.
That's the thing. There's no way you can look at him and say, oh, he's had 1 year and it was a fluke. Like, we all know that it could happen. But when you're paying the amount of money they're paying for him, you're not paying for a guy who's consistently done it, right? Cameron Green, you're not paying for a player who's consistently done it. Even Tim David, you're really paying a lot of these guys for what they will be doing in the next 2 to 3 years. But the batting has held up. The batting has been fine. The bowling hasn't held up, though. And I think that is, certainly part of the problem. I think almost all the way through the game, they've been quite poor. But they're 4-4. I would say that almost all their wins have been against fairly ordinary teams so far. So, I wouldn't be massively excited from them.
And I mean, Jared, if Piyush Chawla is your best bowler, no disrespect, Piyush. I mean, the fact that you're still going is amazing. But if he's your best bowler, you've got a problem. And I was actually staggered to know that Piyush is 34. He's Virat Kohli's age, and if you put their pictures together, well, they don't look the same age at all. But I mean, Mumbai's an interesting one. I would still say that they're in with a shot, but the team that I'm super impressed with this week, even though they lost out, is Rajasthan Royals.
Yeah.
Because bear in mind, Joss Butler isn't clicking like he's supposed to click right now. And then you've got Yashasvi Jaiswal, who is the second leading run scorer in the IPL, striking at 160, 100, which he just scored, 120 odd and 61 deliveries, strike rate of 200. He's got 350s, 4 scores of 50 plus in 9 innings. And it's just that same trend that we see with India's under-19 stars. You saw it with Virat Kohli. We've seen it with Shubman Gill. We've seen it with Rishabh Pant. And now we're seeing it with Yashasvi Jaiswal. And I think that this guy is probably the find of the IPL, especially when it comes to the batting department. And if Joss Butler starts clicking with him at the top, I see this team going all the way even, because they've got a solid bowling attack, right? You've got 2 premier spinners in Ashwin and Chahal. And then you've got Trent Bolt, who is practically the best new ball bowler in the IPL. Someone can challenge me on that, but I'm not going to change my opinion. So that, I think, is a solid team which can actually challenge the likes of Gujarat, who seem to be the team to beat once again. Most well-placed to defend their title.
I think they're the best 2 teams. I just finished the power list, and there was I think while I was finishing the draft, Rajasthan lost that game. And I wasn't going to put them above Gujarat, but I was wondering whether I should have them in the same tier. And then they lost that game, and I was like, I don't rate Mumbai that high. I thought Mumbai played well in that game, but I still don't think Mumbai should have been in that position. There was some interesting bowling. Sandeep Sharma bowled incredible in that game. And was it Ashwin or Chahal? One of the spinners bowled really well as well. And everyone else...
Ashwin did.
Yeah, it was Ashwin, wasn't it? Everyone
Chahal
else
went for a
for
few. I
10s.
think he went for 32 and
I think
3.
everyone went for over 10s
Yeah.
except for those two. I've got
I mean,
these
Jason
numbers.
Holder went for 3 sixes and 3 deliveries, defending 16-17 in the last over.
Wow.
So
I've written about Jason Holder before. He's an incredibly expensive death bowler. He just takes a lot of wickets and sometimes it works for him. But I've got this down in front of me on my notebook that Sandeep had 1 for 20 off 3, and at that stage, at the other end in the power play, Mumbai had scored 38 runs for no loss. So it does show you a couple of their, but it's a good lineup, as you said. I've got no problem there. We're going to take another break here on Uncovered, and then we will come back and we're going to talk about Pakistan's small circle. And this is not a slight on Def Mango.
Our next partner is Athletic Greens. If cricket has taught us anything, it's that green things are good for you. I take AG1 by Athletic Greens every day. I gave AG1 a try because a while back I was stuck in a studio reporting on New Zealand, England on overnight. When those games went on, I was up early watching India, Australia at around 4 a.m. In between afternoon naps, I had to watch the Women's World Cup. And when all that was finished, I was doing early mornings for Bangladesh, England. Ignoring the fact that there's too much cricket, that's a stupid schedule for a human being as well. And so Athletic Greens was a far better alternative to ice baths. And after taking it, I felt a lot better. In fact, the whole thing probably kept me sane and healthy at the same time. And also being the kind of nutritional drink I needed to survive those hours, and also the 2 a.m. biltong binges I did a few times. Look, I'm not going to pretend I have a balanced diet. So Athletic Greens is how I cover the nutritional bases. 1 small scoop of AG1 with water, and I drink it first thing in the morning each day. Done. If a comprehensive solution is what you need from your supplement routine, then Athletic Greens is giving you a free 1-year supply of vitamin D and also 5 free travel packs with your first purchase. Go to athleticgreens.com/Inca. That's the Inca from the end of my Red Inca podcast. So athleticgreens.com/Inca. Check it out now because it is the best green top you'll ever invest in.
Welcome back to Uncovered. Jarrod and Behram here. Remember, if you do have any super chats, feel free to whip them in before we finish up here. I want to talk about something that I don't think people know how common this sort of thing is, but it does happen from time to time. But Pakistan and New Zealand played a game the other day where the circle was, the inner ring was wrong. Can you take me through what it was? A one-dayer, wasn't it? It was the start of a one-dayer. Yeah. Can you take me through what the hell happened and how people work this out? Because I know this is going to sound weird. These things happen a lot, and it's not always that the media and the fans work it out.
Yeah, well, honestly, it was the first time I've seen anything of the sort on a cricket field. I was in the press box in the Rawalpindi Stadium covering the game, and they bowled the first over. First over of the game was done. Second over, all of a sudden, we see there's a pause, and now we're not sure what's happening. Guys are coming in with tapes and stuff. There's some measurements going on. And then one half of the circle was altered. So not the entire circle, but one half was altered. And I think it's quite an educated guess at this point, is that they had that circle as per the pitch used in the previous ODI. Yeah. And that is as Pakistan cricket can get. I mean, that is the definition. Haphazard things happening like that. Something that is treated like, oh, so what? We'll fix this. Not the first time we've seen something of the sort happen. But yeah, it was a bit of a funny moment. And I'm not quite sure what to make of it. All I can say is that Aleem Dar was officiating and he's not on the elite panel anymore. So that's what you will.
It was definitely a sub-elite moment. For those who don't know, generally when these things happen, and as I said, they do happen more often. Quite often there'll be 1 or 2 markers that are in the wrong spot and an umpire or a fielder would just kick them into the right spot. So these things do happen from time to time. This one was more egregious and more funny. But they almost always happen because of old pitches. And someone forgets that you're not using the same pitch that you're using before. But I played in a club cricket game where we were bowling and the other team just couldn't time a ball and all of our fast bowlers were having trouble. They threw me the ball. And I remember I bowled my first delivery and I was like, I couldn't get it down to the other end. And it was so weird. And I remember I bowled like 25 overs this day and I couldn't, and no batter could hit me because and every time I put the ball even slightly above their eyes, no one could hit it. And if I tried to bowl quicker, it would be like meters short, right? And this just kept happening, but it was a ridiculous thing. This team like struggled to like 200 runs. And then at the end of the day, we waited for the opposition to leave. And then we went out and we measured the pitch. And what had happened is someone had just marked it based on where the lines were in a previous wicket. But Earth doesn't work that way, right? And it had changed. And I think it was a ridiculous it was like a huge amount of extra meters, like an extra meter and a half or 2 meters.
What I would be curious about is how do they do it with at Lords with the slope and everything? That's got to be challenging, right?
Well, I don't
Measuring the
know. I
pitch
don't
with
think
that.
that. I mean, there's no way. I mean, this shouldn't be happening for a Pakistan ODI either. But there shouldn't. Every ground in the world, they should just be measuring it every fresh time. Which sounds like this sounds like the sort of thing that is really obvious. I don't think this always happens. And my guess is, if you measured every international cricket pitch and every first class and professional cricket pitch, that you would find that there are a lot of cricket pitches that aren't the exact right amount. And if you look at those circles, the inner rings, you would find this more often than not. I think this one was so obvious that there was no way getting around it. But I've worked with cricket teams where they've come off and said, I don't think that is the right shaped circle. I remember someone telling me, and I'm trying to remember who they were playing for, but it was an associate nation playing it like a World Cup qualifier. I can't remember who the player was. And he said that he was pretty sure that when they marked the circle, it was the women's size, which is 5 yards shorter than the men's. And no one did anything because they'd already been going on for a couple of overs before someone looked down and went, someone was at point and going, I feel a bit close here. So the Pakistan one was incredibly hilarious the way it came out. But this is something that happens more often than not. Usually I would ignore bilateral ODIs. But A, you're from Grassroots Cricket and you probably had to cover this game. And B, we are coming to the World Cup and these were, ODIs in Asia. So I suppose they need to be talked about just a little bit more. Take me through the one day. What do I need to know about the Pakistan-New Zealand games?
Well, first of all, I just want to say that if this is a recurring problem, why don't they have Spider Cam deal with it? not the superhero, Spider Cam deal with it. They could possibly put in some tech over there that could measure these things. And I mean, I know Stuart Broad is not a fan of robots, but this one kind of makes sense.
To be fair, I don't think they need. Could use a measuring tape. I mean, you're right. You could do that. I mean, there should be. I would have thought and I've never seen this before. But I'm pretty sure the umpires should be checking it, right? Not the ground staff. Like,
I suppose so.
I don't want to slander any ground staff, but you could actually give, if you had, I don't know, a bunch of fast bowlers and you made it a couple of feet shorter, you could drastically change that. And maybe I've never seen umpires measure it. Maybe they do. I'm just saying, I don't think we always have the exact same measurements on cricket grounds. And I think quite often when there's older pitches, people trust that and ground swells and moves and all sorts of things. But yes, Spider Cam, if you had a proper spatial tracking thing, you're right. You could also tell it straight away.
In theory, you could. But anyway, what you need to know with respect to the series is that it's extremely important to Pakistan because this might be the last time they're playing at home, given all of the news that's surrounding the Asia Cup. We don't know what's going to happen on that front. Latest I've heard, and this might be a total rumor, but India considering a 5-team tournament to replace the Asia Cup altogether. So I'm not too sure on this. Don't quote me on it, but things have been a bit topsy-turvy with respect to the Asia Cup and Pakistan hosting India. So we don't know whether or not Pakistan will play at home again. These are 5 ODIs. And even though it is a depleted New Zealand side, Pakistan need the game time. In the last 3.5 years, Pakistan have played 23 to 24 ODIs, which is a ridiculously low number, especially given that I personally think that the skill set that Pakistan's players have is best suited to ODI cricket. So if I was the PCB, I would be scheduling a shit ton of ODIs for Pakistan, especially so that Babar could break some records or Fakhr and Imam could get some runs. But good thing is that those guys have been amongst the runs. And if you look at the past 6 years, I think Fakhr and Imam are actually the most successful ODI opening pair. And they've got 7 ODI 100 partnerships now as a result of their first the effort in the first ODI with 100 runs they put up at the start. Fakhr Zaman has back-to-back hundreds in the series. He has now become only the second player in history to record, I guess, three scores of 150 or 165 plus. I think the other one is Rohit. Obviously, he has 3 doubles. So that's an interesting stat. He is the only player in history of ODI cricket where he has 2 scores of 180 and 190 in a chasing effort. So he has that going for him. He's a man imperious touch because he also got 100 in the last ODI versus New Zealand when they visited earlier. So he's on 3 ODI 100s in a row. Very good opportunity to level Sangakkara's record of 4 ODI 100s in a row that he got in the 2015 ODI World Cup. That's a little subplot that's brewing, and Fakhr is the rage of the town right now. Everyone is celebrating him. Pakistan were playing in Rawalpindi, and off late, even though historically Rawalpindi's surface has aided fast bowlers, it's an absolute road these days. In fact, I live here, and maybe some roads in Pakistan might not be as good as that Rawalpindi pitch. So there's a stat for you. And
let me just go back to Fucker for 1 minute. You can, if you finish off on that tangent, but I just want to Fucker Zaman. I find him really interesting. Not very good at first class cricket. Average is sub 40. I don't think people know that. Average is sub 40 in first class cricket. Not very good in T20 cricket. Average is under 30. So not quite as bad. But again, you've just said that this is a man who's chasing down Kumar's record. You would expect him to be averaging over 30 in T20 cricket, right?
Absolutely.
He might be the only cricketer, and I want to put Shai Hope probably is in this conversation as well. Although I would say that Fakhar Zaman is a lot better at one-day cricket than maybe Shai Hope is because of the strike rate and everything else.
Yeah, 90 plus strike rate.
Yeah, but it's really weird that we now have a period where we have two players, both batters, who are near specialists in ODI cricket, who haven't, despite doing some good things in the other formats, who haven't really cracked the other formats. There's no reason that he would be this good in one-day cricket and not as good in either T20 or first-class cricket, right? So at a certain point, some of those skills that he has should have leaked over. It's a really, really random thing. And just to prove this isn't just a test match thing either. Sorry, an international thing, I should say. First-class cricket, as I said, 38. List A average 49. And T20 average, 27. It's actually lower in international cricket. I forgot it's 21 in international cricket. Yeah. It's such a bizarre record. It feels made up.
Yeah, and just to think that in 67 ODI innings at the time of this show, Fakhar Zaman has 10 hundreds and 15 50s. So in 25 of those 67 innings, he's gone on to score, which is a fantastic record, especially if you're an explosive batsman like Fakhar Zaman is. He's someone who just goes for it and the sort of player that would win Pakistan a game single-handedly. So I think that is a very, very promising statistic.
No, you're right. I mean, strike rate 94. So I think the global strike rate in one-day cricket at the moment is about 91. So he's not massively above it, but he's above it enough. And the way he bats is a little bit... If you compare him to someone like Rohit's in control when he, as a one-day batter. This fucker's a bit more... you're just like, this may not work. And then later on, as he gets into the innings, there's a little bit more control there. No, I think he's fascinating. Anything else? Anything from New Zealand that I've missed? Because as you said, it's not a full strength team. They're only going to have a handful of players who are probably going to play in the next World Cup. But is there anything that they need to know there?
Yeah, just to close off on Pakistan over there. Fakhar and Rohit, their comparison is a good one because Rohit is perhaps more fluid and Fakhar is very agricultural. With respect to shots, he'll just mow it down the ground. But I think he's improved his game on the offside. With respect to New Zealand, if Fakhar Zaman has gotten 200s in 2 games and is on 3 in a row, Daryl Mitchell, who has never played at first drop in his life in List A cricket, has scored 200s on the bounce. And this is a guy who has filled so many gaps for New Zealand. I've lost count of them. Comes in as opener in the T20 World Cup, makes it work versus England. In the test team, I reckon he's just been filling or plugging gaps or cavities ever since he's made his debut. And to good measure as well. I think he's one of the Wisden cricketers of the year, if I'm not wrong.
I think he was. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah. And the way he played in England, I mean, New Zealand may have gone on to get whitewashed in that series, but everyone will remember Daryl Mitchell's performance in addition to Bazball. And I asked Tom Latham this question in the presser, that given that Kane, fingers crossed, I hope he makes it. We all love to watch Kane Williamson bat. But given that he might miss out very likely on the World Cup and he's their premier number 3 batter, is Daryl the kind of player that they're looking to fill that gap? And that's exactly what Tom said. He said that he's someone who's literally always done that for New Zealand. He's made a habit out of it. And if you look at Daryl Mitchell as a competitor, brilliant in the field, will give you some buffer overs. And I just love the way this guy will plant his right foot and absolutely go for it. Proper golf swings versus the Pacers. And I think he uses his feet really well versus the spinners. Now, these weren't raging turners in Rawalpindi. And I mean, Mohammad Nawaz and Osama Mir might not be the 2 best spinners that he's going to face in the World Cup. Osama Mir might not even be there. But I think that the way he has come out of his crease and wafted them over their heads, I think that's a very promising sign for New Zealand going forward. So you could expect him to be starting at number 3. And I think New Zealand is one of those amazing teams in this world who even though a lot of their players are missing quite frequently now, especially given the Trent Bolt situation, the gulf between their A team and B team is not as drastic as perhaps some of the other teams. You've got some really good players coming in. Rachin Ravindra is supposed to be a prodigy. I know he hasn't cut it just yet, but I see some promise over there because he is one of those utility players. Maybe he could be a Jadeja at some point if he gets like his lines properly in the future, become that sort of bowler. Not quite a hitter though. And Mark Chapman, he was the man of the series in the T20 internationals. Was a late entrant into the ODI squad, but unfortunately hasn't been able to cut it just yet in ODIs. So I guess Phillips will probably occupy that
He was
spot.
incredible in the T20s, wasn't he? Yeah.
He was absolutely brilliant. The way he played the spinners. And he had this ramp shot versus Haris Rauf at his pace, which was just probably the shot of the T20 series.
So you look at Jameson, Chapman, Mitchell, Will Young, all these. You could even throw Devon Conway in, even though he's not.
You have to look at the form he's in for Chennai.
Yeah, but even though he's not like, he was someone who grew in the New Zealand system. It's really interesting that so many of these players are coming on late, which means that, if they have, Bracewell's another one as well, right?
Yeah,
they seem to have a very similar situation to what Australia had in peak Australian period, which is, okay, worst case scenario, number 6 is injured. Okay, well, there's another number 6 out there averaging 45. We'll just bring them in, right? And that keeps happening again and again with modern New Zealand cricketers. I think we saw with their bowling stocks, their fast bowling stocks, in the England series, that once you scrape beyond Jameson and Bolt and, Wagner and Southee, it wasn't
in ODI cricket, you have to add Matt Henry to that conversation.
Oh, of course. Sorry, Matt Henry. Yeah. So, but once they had 2 or 3 injuries, so I think Matt Henry was out of that test. Jameson was injured, and then they didn't pick Bolt. It did look a little bit thinner on after that, but you still had 5 seam bowling options that were all, even if it's the end of Wagner, right? It's still Wagner still did some impressive things in that series. And then the same with the batters. It's just like I'm not sure all these guys are going to be stars, but when Watling went, I was like, how do you replace Watling? Blundell's making more runs, right?
Yeah.
It's ridiculous.
But he's making a lot more errors as well. If you look at his keeping statistics, they're not as impressive as...
Well, if you look at... He had a great period where he didn't drop anything, Blundell. And now he started... Yeah, I'm pretty sure that... I can't remember what it was. It was over like a 12-test period. He hadn't made any mistakes. Since then, he's made a lot. But he also he went up to the stumps against medium pace in that series against England, which I think was a huge difference. And I'll be doing a video on that probably before the England's test.
But well, Tommy Latham keeps wicket for them in ODIs, so I suppose he's not part of that conversation. Latham got runs. He got 98 and then was, got a feather edge versus Haris Rauf. Babar Azam hasn't gotten 100, but got 49 and 65. I'm not sure if you've watched this clip, but Babar creamed, I reckon it was one of Ish Sodhi or Rachin Ravindra. I cannot recall, but he creamed him over extra cover for a 6, and that is just a sight for sore eyes. If no one's seen it, just go YouTube it or something. Go look at that 6. It's funny, I was at the ground. Fucker got 100, got lots of cheers. Babar gets a 50, noisier ground. So it's an interesting sort of spectacle, really, to watch Babar Azam play in Pakistan, because the fan following that he's got has almost gotten a bit scary at this point. And
Don't talk any more about that, because you and I have already recorded a podcast about it.
Absolutely.
It's coming out in a couple of weeks. You're getting very dangerous to ruining that particular podcast. Mate, thank you very much for coming on the podcast. Your Twitter handle is DefMango, which, of course, I would have put on if Muku was here. Muku would have put on the screen, but Muku's gone to bed, hopefully. But thank you very much for coming on. You'll be back later in the week, you and I, talking about Mickey Arthur, and I'll certainly get you to pop in for a few podcasts. But thank you very much. I'm Jarrod Kimber as well. And if you need to find me, I'm everywhere. If you need to find Behram, you can find him at either Grassroots Cricket or on Twitter at DefMango. But we'll see you again Wagon Wheel next week. I'll see you again Wagon Wheel next week. No, what podcast is this?
The Red Inca on Thursday, I believe.
I'll see you on Thursday for Red Inca. I have another podcast episode with what's his name? Bharat. I've almost forgotten who he is at this point. He'll be out later in the week. He'll be on Wagon Wheel. And then, of course, we'll be back again for Uncovered next week as well. Thank you to everyone, and I'll talk to you again very soon. Let me tell you a story. When I was a kid, people would ask my dad if he wanted me to be Viv Richards, and he always said no. He wanted